Charles Barkley says he roots against all super teams. These quotes are lengthy, but they're really good. I'm going to read them to you. I think it's worth hearing it all. Charles says, I'm not a fan of super teams. So listen, if they win it, they win it. Speaking of the Nets. But to be perfectly clear, I'm rooting against those guys. I root against all super teams. If I'd known you guys were going to make fun of me for not winning a championship, I would have joined a super team back in my day. Me and Patrick Ewing and Karl Malone and John Stockton. But I feel good about my legacy. I'm pretty sure Patrick and John and Carl do too. LeBron started this super team thing in Miami, and hey, it's the way the game is played now. To go back to my day, even though we didn't win the championship, the Sixers were worth watching. The Knicks were worth watching. The Pacers were worth watching when Reggie was there. Same thing with Atlanta and Dominique. I just don't think it's good for business. But these young kids, they all fold to peer pressure and feel like they've got to win a championship or their life sucks. Fascinating quotes from Charles Barkley, because I think there's so much in that to unpack. First of all, as one who came of age loving this sport in the 70s and then very much so in the golden age, which were the 80s and the 90s, he's talking about all-time great players who never won a championship. And you can say it's because Michael's teams kept beating them all, but they all got there and they all knocked on the door. Charles played him in the finals. Ewing played him tough as hell in the playoffs. It felt like almost every single year. And obviously Stockton and Malone played him in the finals in back-to-back years, and both those series went 6. They had chances to win. Charles went 6 games in the finals in 93 with Michael. So they had chances to win, and they don't. Somewhere along the line, it became all about either you win the championship or your career is a bust. I'm not sure when that happened because it wasn't the case then. I do sort of feel like I need to raise my hand because I wonder if Mike and Mike had played some role in that. Because I think what happened was when the LeBron versus Michael, and maybe even before that, when the Kobe versus Michael debate started happening, I think that's when we started counting rings. Like, we weren't counting Larry's rings and Magic's rings. You knew that Russell had all those rings just because there were so ridiculously many of them. But we didn't count all the other best players in the NBA in the 70s, John Havlicek, Rick Barry, name whoever you want. Kareem, Elvin Hayes. We didn't sit around and count their championships as a way of determining how great they were. We never talked about Ted Williams and Ernie Banks as being anything other than all-time great players, even though they never won World Series. Winning championships didn't have to be the be-all, end-all. And then all of a sudden it was. And the conversation around the sport became, I think, the motivating factor for that. And in that regard, I cannot blame these guys for feeling as though, like, if I'm sitting in their shoes, I can see where I might say, so you're criticizing me for putting myself in the best position to win a championship. But then if I don't win a championship, you're going to say, well, he never reached his potential, or his career is on some level of failure, or whatever it is. He isn't all that great because he never won. Well, which is it? I get that. I get players feeling that way. It doesn't make me hate super teams any less, but I understand it. I'm not sure exactly what can be done about it. We need to find a way to go back to the other way. And we're never stopping the counting of the rings. The counting of the rings is now with us. That's never going to stop. So we have to figure out a way to combat the super team phenomenon without hoping that that will go away. With me on the Goodyear hotline, let's talk about Brooklyn, because they have been doing what they've been doing and basically have barely at all had their big three on the floor together. And I suppose there is no guarantee that they will. But I'll ask you a similar question to what I said in the West. If we get to the playoffs and Kyrie, KD, and Harden are all healthy and they're all playing, what will be your expectation for them?
They should win the championship. If they're all healthy, Brooklyn's going to be the favorite. I will tell you this, though. I hear all these guys talking about MVP. You know, at one point, it was Joel Embiid. At one point, it was LeBron. I think Chris Paul should be in the conversation. But the MVP in the NBA right now is James Harden. Mm-hmm. What he's doing right now without KD and without Kyrie, we can't ignore that. James Harden is the MVP of the NBA, plain and simple. Like I say, Embiid had it for a minute. LeBron's been right there. I talk about Chris Paul, what he's doing in Phoenix. But the MVP in the NBA right now is James Harden.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think when you look not only at doing it without those guys, but the way he has adapted what he does. He is the most unique, well, among the most unique players in the NBA, and he's been doing it that way in Houston for such a long time. And he comes to Brooklyn, and it feels like he has been willing to be exactly what they need him to be. And Charles, you know as well as anyone, superstars aren't always willing to do that, and Harden has been willing to do it. I've been impressed.
Well, let me say this. First of all, what James has done, like, he's not the same guy who played like he did in Houston. He don't play like that anymore, having a bunch of guys just standing around and watch him go one-on-one. To me, he's played like a real point guard. And the game, he obviously hasn't had KD, but when Kyrie is there, he makes Kyrie better. But, man, when he's not there, even last night against Portland, I was watching that game last night. I'm like, I didn't think they could win that game last night. And I know you guys got him on TV tonight against the Jazz. Listen, if he go into Utah and win tonight, that to me, like, if he don't get MVP after that, people are just being biased. Listen, he did not handle the situation well coming out of Houston. He quit on those Rockets. But you know what? Hey, he made a mistake. He apologized for it. But what he's doing in Brooklyn right now cannot be overlooked, and we should appreciate it. Because, listen, this guy, and I know I'm going to probably get criticized for saying this guy might be the best basketball player in the world. I mean, he might be the best player in the world. I've always thought he was the best offensive player. He wasn't as great as Michael and Kobe. But I said a few years ago, and people laughed at me, he's the best offensive player I've ever seen. But right now, no disrespect to LeBron or Giannis or anybody, James Harden might be the best basketball player in the world, period.
Wow, I was not expecting you to say that, and so I'm sitting here sort of trying to figure out how to respond to it. The criticism I would think would be that while I think he has been a little more of a willing defender this year and in recent years, that's what people would say, that the best players in the league do it that well on both sides of the floor. Charles, what would you say to someone who would say that to you?
Well, I think, it's always, listen, James has made some. That style in Houston was never going to win, but he has adapted and changed. I think he is a little bit better defensively. But for them to win games without KD and without Kyrie, you got to give that man some credit. And like I say, he is the most awesome offensive player I've ever seen. Listen, Michael and Kobe were better players from the guard standpoint, but as far as offensively, they couldn't shoot threes like him. They were not as great as dribbling the basketball, going to the basket, getting fouled. I mean, this guy, every time he goes to the basket, he's going to hit somebody and get 2 free throws. But we got to give that guy credit, man. He is an offensive machine, plain and simple. And some of the nights when Kyrie is going off, it's because of James, plain and simple.
Last time I talked to you about this topic with James Harden, that was November 25th, and you didn't think it could work. Change your opinion?
Not at all. I don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to be I think they bought him in because they wasn't sure what was going to happen with Kyrie. They bought him in as an insurance policy. And now I think it's going to be fascinating watching those 3 guys play together if they all play together. I mean, we have no idea what's going on with Kyrie. But, no, I don't think it's going to work at all because those other guys don't bring in the diversity to the table. Those other 2 guys, they are offensive players. They don't play defense. They don't rebound. So it's only one basketball. I think it's got 0 chance of working.
But you also, and you know this, where it feels like KD could get 30 on 16 shots. You know, he would find a way to get to the line, and he can be economical. The other guys are volume shooters. Certainly Harden is. And then I just wonder, what kind of offense do you run when you have 3 alphas like that?
Well, I think that's why I don't think it's going to work. I think it's really going to be like they just going to take turns, and I don't think that's going to work because, like I say, other than KD, the other 2 guys, they're not going to, like, when KD went to Golden State, he's like, okay, I'll play defense and I'll rebound the ball. I don't see Kyrie and James doing that. I think when KD got the ball, they're just going to be standing around. And so I don't think, like I say, listen, I don't think it's going to work at all going to be fun watching because seeing how James and Kyrie handle the New York media, to me, is going to be like the most fascinating part of this whole thing.
But if we know this, the Nets have to know this, then how is this going to work? So what are they thinking why is this going to work in their minds, and we have, a big question mark attached to it?
Well, because I think it's what KD wanted to do. I mean, KD wanted Kyrie, and now I think he realized it now, like, yeah, this is not going to work. I better bring James in here as an insurance policy. That's what I think happened. But clearly KD is running the organization. So I think this was about what he wanted.
What do you think Steve Nash is thinking today?
I'm going to get the blame if this thing don't work. They're going to kill me. Like, and I really think they put Steve in a really awkward position because Steve Nash is obviously was a great player and he's a great guy. But you got one guy comes out and says, hey, we don't need a coach.
Yeah.
And now you bring in James, who clearly shows up when he wants to. So I think it really puts Steve between a rock and a hard place. Because, listen, if they have to get rid of somebody, it's going to be Steve Nash. But it's not going to be James or KD.
But you think
I think Kyrie is the wild card in this whole thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. Do you think that they're ready to move on from Kyrie? Because I don't know everybody's kind of casual about where Kyrie is and what he's doing. I don't know if he wants to play, and it doesn't sound like he's really that interested in coming back anytime soon.
Well, I think this is the reason they made the trade. I think the Nets have lost faith in Kyrie. They're like, and I think Kevin has lost, like, I better bring James in here. Because, listen, even without Kyrie, James and KD together is pretty formidable. I mean, they're going to be just as good with or without Kyrie. So I think KD's like, yo, man, I can't trust this dude. He shows up when he wants to. He's going to do his own thing. I've got to bring James in as an insurance. Hey, and listen, let's be something straight. This is probably the greatest insurance policy we ever seen in the NBA.
You think LeBron and AD are concerned about what the Nets just did?
No. I mean, they're still the best duo. Listen, there's nobody right now, if you get any fool or jackass on your show today, we're all guessing about the Nets. Ain't nobody going to get on here and tell you they are the NBA favorites right now. If they do that, they don't know anything about basketball. I mean, I got to be honest with you, Dan. I said this when you said this a few months ago. I would love to be a fly on the wall because I prayed that they got James Harden because I want to see this social experiment, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fascinating, and it's in New York City.